To me, the most vital and important and fascinating type of information, and the type of information that satisfies my desire for truth, is information from questions that haven't been answered or even thought of. Of course, not answered, but questions that haven't been thought of. And one that comes to mind that I considered quite a bit over the years is the Ten Commandments. That event when Moses was on the mountain and God gave him the law, the Torah. So, okay, it says that God wrote the commandments on the tablets with his own finger, and that naturally goes to the question, which I'm kind of curious why a lot of other people haven't asked it. What was the script that God used? And I haven't gotten a good answer to that question. But I know one thing for sure, that the script would have been holy to him, and it would have had to have been understood by Moses. That's definitely true. And so the next question is, how would you represent that script? How many letters were there? Would it be just in a line? And here's another idea. God has no beginning or end. It would be natural maybe to represent that script in the form of a circuit. And I'm really actually quite convinced of that. Another thing I'm thinking about lately is the times we live in are very dark in the sense there's this foreboding, and there's lack of knowing what's real, a lack of being even able to find the truth, fatigue at being lied to all the time. I know a lot of people are feeling that way, and I think hopefully what I'm talking about, what I'm going to talk about, will raise people's spirits, and at best maybe will be a drink of fresh, clear, cool water after wandering in the desert, so to speak. What I'd like to read is an explanation of a concept that I call the Ox circuit. It's not complex, the concept, the idea of it, but initially grasping what I'm trying to say seems to have been for a lot of people. And maybe I'm not really being perceptive on that, because not a lot of people have actually heard this. If you've read my book, you have, of course. Or if you went to the website that I had up many years ago, I mean, one of the tens of people that did, and then you would know as well. So let me read this. I don't think it's been out there, not in video format, ever. So I call it the Ox circuit. The concept of the Ox circuit needs to be put forth here as a base for future posts concerning the Neo-Alchemist understanding and usurpation of this powerful symbol. Because I think the idea is known by the illuminated, and they use it for nefarious purposes. They think it has power. They like their God, small g, reverse everything, negate it. They are not creative. They don't create. They take what is holy and subvert it, and attempt to corrupt it. Get the false information out first, right? Before you can hear the truth. That's their MO. It's a critical and very unorthodox concept must be put forth in order to gain understanding the ancient gods and their mythology as the illuminated understand. When the bull appears in myth, it doesn't necessarily symbolize Zeus or some other powerful goddess specifically, but is a corrupt representation for the one God, the God who cursed the serpent in the garden. There's much more to the idea that a bull should symbolize the one God. The word in Hebrew for ox or bullock is shor. It means simply an ox, but the root for shor is shur, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing these correctly. Someone can, of course, correct me. which means to go around, to go about, or to journey. This image came out of my brother's book, Sidonia, The Secret Chronicles of Mars. So I think he's probably okay that I ripped him off here. The threshing floor in ancient times was a flat circular area of smooth rock where the ox or team of oxen would loosen wheat grain from the hard outer chaff. The method is still used today in places where modern machinery is not available. The idea of going round would apply to the ox in light of the constellation Taurus passing through the heavens. Of course, the ox was an essential part of threshing, processing grain harvest, and the image of the animal traveling around the center post of a threshing circle, as well the constellation Taurus revolving overhead comes to mind. It's an image of Taurus. There's the Pleiades. I believe this is Aldebaran, and for some reason I have Mars here in the ecliptic that goes across. Still, there is another aspect of the circuit quality to the idea of the ox. For this, we look to the alphabet and the language of the Pentateuch and the genesis of this writing system, Phoenician to the Aramaic. In his Temple at the Center of Time, David Flynn writes, the Semitic Hebrew and Phoenician and Egyptian cultures were in contact with each other from greatest antiquity. Renaissance theologians believe that Moses was the inventor of the second sound-based script in the ancient world. They derive this understanding from his writings of Eupolemists that state Moses was the first wise man to teach the alphabets to the Jews, who transferred them to the Phoenicians, and the Phoenicians passed to the Greeks. The only place I've ever read this is in Dave's book with his reference. And I thought that was really fascinating. That's not what you hear from academia. The Phoenician letter Tav, that looks like a cross on its side, meaning mark, is the same as the sign used in Ezekiel's vision to mark the foreheads of the righteous. And the Lord said unto him, go through the midst of the city and through the midst of Jerusalem, and set a mark upon the foreheads of the men that sigh and that cry for all the abominations that be done in the midst thereof. Ezekiel 9:4. The lamb's blood was similarly marked on the sides and top of doorposts during Exodus from Egypt, in a motion forming a tav. And they shall take the blood and strike it on the two sides of the posts and on the upper door post of the houses, wherein they shall eat it. And the blood shall be for you a token upon the houses where ye are, and when I see the blood, I will pass over you, and the plague shall not be upon you to destroy you, when I smite the land of Egypt. Exodus 12:7-13. So God wrote the 10 Commandments using a letter system that was holy to him with his own finger, as I mentioned before. Moses said, and the Lord delivered unto me 2 tablets of stone written with the finger of God, and on them was written according to all the words which the Lord spake with you in the mount out of the midst of the fire in the day of the assembly. Deuteronomy 9:10. A better representation of a letter system that would be considered holy to God of the universe, who has no beginning or end, would be appropriately depicted in the form of a circuit. Consider that the top letter of the circuit would be the mark, or X, and that the other letters would proceed from left to right, just as the constellations pass overhead in the night sky. This one letter, if known to mark the start and end of the circular arrangement, would later evolve into separate forms over a vast period of time. The aggregation of the taus, the combination of them, when thought of as 2 separate ideas, could also represent the same mark combined, forming a new letter. The combination of the taus would appear as the Phoenician Aleph, mimicking the image of the bull or ox head turned to the side. to get a better idea of what's going on here, because this is a bit confusing. Take a look at this. Let's say this is the writing system that God used. Let's just say it is, and it's in the proper format. It's in a circuit. Where do you start and where do you end? I propose that you would start at the cross, right at the top, and you would end with the cross. But if you wrote the script out in a linear format, which is contrary to the nature of God, it would look like this, with the cross at the beginning and the end. And here's the concept of taking that system here, where it was broken apart, and adding the idea that there's a connection here, and that is where you see the crosses combined into what is called the Aleph, the Alf. And that's what I'm showing here. Now, if you did that, you'd have 21 letters, and you'd have 21 letters here. But there wouldn't be a cross anymore. You'd have this combination, but you'd be lacking the idea of where it came from. So you take the combination and say it's a new letter, the Aleph. You see the combination of the crosses here, and you'd leave the cross at the end. Now you'd have 22. You'd have 22 letters. Here's a little bit more that I go into trying to illustrate that point, but I thought these were better illustrations to illustrate the idea of the original circuit and how it evolved. The representation of the first sound-based script as a circuit with the same sign, the sign of the cross, becomes separate letters when represented as a list or in a list. The limited or linear list has a beginning and an end, and is unlike the nature of God, whereas a circuit has neither. The beginning and the end are both separate and yet are one, man as God, starting and ending with the cross. Christ refers to himself. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end, the first and the last. It's Revelation 22:13. This is in Greek, right? Alpha and Omega, first and last, but he might also say I'm the Aleph and the Tav, or I'm the Tav and the Tav. That makes sense. Yet there is always an effort by the Nakash to invert or substitute himself with any symbolic references to the truth. Notice the similarity between the Masonic compass and square and the Phoenician Alph. Do you see? This is never, ever discussed. There's a lot of other meanings here, but I thought it might be significant because, of course, there's no coincidence with any of the symbolism that the Illuminated put forward. They like to show everything, and they like to feel that they're extremely tricky and clever. The compass and the square are often depicted with joined hands directly above or below to illustrate the unity of the society of the Masonic Brotherhood, right? Plausible deniability. When the hands are shown joined inside the symbol, the union of the Taos is most apparent. There you go. There's power in that. They understand that, I guess.